Hey everyone, welcome back. Here we are, and we're talking about our final principle, which is transformation. So we're glad to be with you again. And here it is. The transformation principle, the key ingredient to creating positive community change is people who have moved from a self-perception of weakness and dependency to a new paradigm or a new mindset of dignity and self-respect. And so, friends, this is probably our most important principle. In some ways, it's the principle that underlies all of the other ones. So, transformation is about change, it's about changing for the better. And of course, we want to see our communities grow and develop. We want to live in peace, we want to have good health, give our children opportunities to learn and experience the world. So the traditional belief in development is that if we can change or improve the external environment in the community, so for example, better hospitals or more agricultural equipment or better security, that is going to change our lives and make our lives better. And that may very well be true. But the transformation principle looks beyond the external environment and points to the internal. What is happening in the hearts and minds of individual people in the community? In some ways, we can think about the objectives of community development, like healthcare, education, security, as the fruit on the tree. And the transformation principle helps us recognize that the fruit will not grow or it will not last if the roots of the tree are not healthy. So, as the principle suggests, we must move our communities from a self understanding of weakness and dependency to a new mindset of dignity and self respect. So, I want to share a couple stories with you. One is from Thailand and one is from Congo. And in the first story, it's one that I was a part of and experienced my time living in Thailand. And there was a group of villagers that we were working with, and they received some funds to build a fish pond. And the objective was to have a sustainable source of food for the community. It was a great plan. It involved all kinds of people in the community that were going to be a part of the work. And the fish pond was successful for about 2 years. And then they started to see a lot of problems. Really, the problems were around ownership. And we understand the importance of ownership and momentum. And there was an inability to follow through with the project. Many people lost interest and things eventually kind of fell into disrepair. But mostly, as I look back, there was a transformation problem. The roots were unhealthy in the community. There was some fighting and arguing, and a lot of people wanted to be in charge of this project and take leadership, but there was few people that really wanted to do the work. And they were arguing about, well, who's going to benefit from the fish pond? Well, are we going to eat the fish? Are we going to sell the fish? And at one point, I remember there was even some supplies that were stolen from by someone in the community. And there was a backstory here in this community. There was already some conflictual relationships amongst leaders. There was a history of dependency there too, a tendency to rely on outside agencies for help instead of starting with what they had. So by adding money into this kind of conflictual environment, it was sort of like pouring gas onto a small flame. But there was another story, and it was these men here from Kinshasa, and they're all welders, and they worked in the city. And they didn't start with money. They actually started with some ABCD training, community center development that our friends in Congo had given them. So instead of starting with the external environment, they shared these internal characteristics. And so one is that they knew each other, they trusted each other, they believed in themselves, and they had a positive self-image about what they were doing, and they were bought into the process and the plan, and they believed in it. They made contributions to it instead of just taking from the project. And instead of animosity and distrust, they really cared for each other. And so it's just a way of offsetting these two different projects. And we start to recognize that there's deeper undercurrents that are affecting the results of projects. And sometimes we can even write up a project at a very superficial level, and everything seems to look good and make sense. But we have to recognize that there's human qualities beneath it all that are going to affect the ultimate outcome. And so sometimes what we need is not a new strategy or the right kind of program, but a new paradigm, a new mindset. It doesn't come from external changes necessarily, projects and outcome oriented approaches, but rather the internal change that is deep and lasting. An interesting example that I use sometimes, and it comes from India, and it shows us how often we can focus on the problem. And when we do that, it doesn't often get to the result we need. It doesn't solve the problem. So, for an example, a waterborne illness that we're all too familiar with is diarrhea, and it can be common where we have issues with clean water. And so, by focusing on a simple solution, medication might work, but people are still going to be getting waterborne illnesses if they don't have access to clean water. And so we go up one level on the problem arrow here, and we get to the deeper issue. If we can get access to clean water, but then we recognize there's a deeper problem, and poverty can be a structural issue. There can be marginalization because of ethnicity or gender, all kinds of structural issues that don't allow people to access power and access water, in this case, is what they need. Behind those structures is an even deeper issue, and that has to do with groups and classes. And in the case of India, there's a caste system. And if you're on the lowest rung of the ladder, the Dalit people, for example, they're going to have even more difficulty accessing clean water. And beneath all of that, there's an even deeper issue, and that has to do with what we think about ourselves. And so even if you can get a person like a Dalit person access to the water that they need, they still have this obstacle, this hurdle of recognizing that they have enough value or they deserve it, because their mindset, their mentality is that I'm a servant and I have less value than other people. Those are the lies that they're being told. And so it's important for us to recognize that we need to not stop at the superficial problems, but recognize that we need to get to the root causes, whether it's poverty, marginalization, displacement, injustices that we experience in many different ways. And it doesn't mean that projects and programs and funding are not important, but behind all of that, there's a need for this mindset shift, a transition from a mentality of hopelessness, despair, conflict towards something different. And Daniela is going to take over now and just kind of take us deeper into that and shed some light on what this transformation principle is all about.
Right. Jamie talked about this internal change, this mindset shift. We like to call that transformation. The word transformation actually just means to change shape. You're moving from one shape into another. So if that's true, that we want this internal change, we need to ask ourselves, what shape are we moving from and what shape are we moving to? Now, in order to do that, we have to first look at what is our shape? What is our present condition? And then we need to look at the other shape. What's the new condition? And I love this scripture from the Christian Bible that describes transformation in such a simple but beautiful way. It goes like this. The old way of life has to go. It's rotten through and through. Get rid of it. And then take on an entirely new way of life, a God-fashioned life, a life renewed from the inside and working itself into your conduct as God accurately reproduces his character in you. It comes from Ephesians 4. So we want to create this condition we desire with things like hope, worth, purpose, community functioning, whole-centered communities. But we can't look ahead unless we have contemplated our present human condition. What are we believing about ourselves? Especially the things that are not true about ourselves and our community. So what is it that is that rotten stuff or the stuff we want to get rid of? Let's consider people who live in poverty. These might be people who are weak or marginalized or poor. Perhaps it's people experiencing displacement or war or natural disaster. If we ask them to describe their present condition, we might expect them to say things like, poverty means I have no home, or I have no food, or an education, or I don't have enough money. Now, in 2002, the World Bank decided to do a huge research project, and they wanted to get to this root of poverty. What does it mean to be poor? But instead of asking experts, they decided that they would actually just ask the poor themselves. So the resulting research came out into a book that was called Voices of the Poor. And in that research, they discovered something very surprising. The roots of poverty weren't what they expected, and some surprising themes emerged from the research. So I'm going to read you a few of these quotations from that book, and I want you to try to pick out some of these themes or some of these roots of poverty as I read it. So the first one, for a poor person, everything is terrible. Illness, humiliation, shame. We are cripples. We are afraid of everything. We depend on everyone. No one needs us. We are like garbage that everyone wants to get rid of. The next one. When I don't have any food to bring my family, I borrow mainly from neighbors and friends. I feel ashamed standing before my family when I have nothing to feed them. I'm not well. I'm unemployed. It's terrible. The next one. We can't afford to invite anyone to our house, and we feel uncomfortable visiting others without bringing a present. The lack of contact leaves one depressed. It creates a constant feeling of unhappiness and a sense of low self-esteem. Next. When one is poor, she has no say in public. She feels inferior. She has no food, so there is famine in her house, no clothing, and no progress in her family. Another, the poor have a feeling of powerlessness and an inability to make themselves heard. Next, what determines poverty or well-being? The Indigenous people's destiny is to be poor. And lastly, if you are hungry, you will always be hungry. If you are poor, you will always be poor. These quotes came from countries like Moldova, Guinea-Bissau, Latvia, Uganda, Cameroon, Ecuador, Vietnam, all over the world. I want to ask you what words stood out to you. What were the words that the poor associated to poverty? These quotes came from people experiencing poverty, but maybe poverty doesn't connect to you. Maybe it's something else that you're thinking about, but I'm sure that some of these words are the words that you resonate with. They're afraid, depend, humiliation, shame, depressed, unhappy, low self-esteem, inferior, powerless, unheard, destiny, forgotten, hopeless. Those are the words that I picked out of those quotes. And those words, they come from all sorts of people throughout the world. So I'm going to pass it on to Kendra to describe maybe a couple of other situations or examples where this mindset comes into play.
Thank you, Daniela. Like Daniela said, maybe poverty doesn't resonate for you or connect with your context. Maybe it's something else that leaves you feeling powerless to make change in your community. Maybe you are living displaced. Maybe you are a refugee living in a foreign land, feeling like you don't have anything or any power to contribute to positive change. Maybe you're living in a minority group and you're a part of a minority group and you feel like you don't have a voice to contribute to positive change. Maybe you're a woman living in a patriarchal society that values the voice of men over women. Maybe you're living in active conflict and there's so many factors that leave you feeling powerless to make change. Maybe you're young and you think you have nothing of value to contribute to the conversation because of your age. Maybe it's something else entirely. However, we all have mindsets that need to be transformed. And of course, many of these realities, poverty, displacement, being a woman, being young, being alive during active conflict, many of those things are caused by things we can't control. Things like injustice, global economics, maybe they're caused by political unrest, all of these things. There's many things we can't control. But when we look at the transformation principle, we're focusing in on the one thing that we can control, and that is our mindset. That is how we look at ourselves and who we believe that we are. And so no matter what your context, we all have lies that we believe, and we all have places where we need our mind to be transformed so we can begin living into the fullness of the power that we all have to make change. So how do we do this, right? As community-centered development practitioners, we believe that true transformation begins from within us, right? And we need God to transform our hearts and our minds. We need to be changed from the inside to see the community and everyone around us be changed outside. Some of these things on here are things we all deal with no matter what your context is. Things like fear and dependency or shame or a feeling of powerlessness. And we want to invite us to think about this like those are old, dirty, worn out clothes that we wear. And we want to take off those old, dirty clothes and put on new, clean, fresh, vibrant clothes that are the truth about who we are. Daniela read a verse a couple minutes ago that we will revisit. From Ephesians, I love this. The old way of life has to go. It's rotten through and through, right? Then take on the entirely new life, a God-fashioned life, a life renewed from the inside, working itself out into your conduct as God accurately reproduces his image in you, right? So we want to transform our minds. We're asking God to transform our thinking so that we can step into the full power of what we were created to do in making the world a better place. So we want to, first, to do this, we have to identify what lies are we believing that's informing how we live and holding us back from the true change we were made to make in this world. So we want to take off the old, dirty, rotten clothes of fear, and we want to put on the new, vibrant clothes of confidence. We want to take off the idea of being dependent and put on the idea of interdependence. We want to take off the idea of shame or humiliation, and we want to walk in dignity because God says we are worthy. We want to take off the depressed hopelessness that we might feel, and we want to take on the joy. We want to take off low self-esteem, the idea that we don't have any power to make change and we don't have any value to make change. And we want to put on self-respect and self-worth. We want to take off the idea that we're inferior for whatever reason and acknowledge that we are made equal in the image of God. We want to take off the lie that says we have no power. And we want to take on the truth that says we have agency and the power to make change. We want to take off the lie that we are unheard, and we want to take on the truth that we are understood. And we finally want to take off the lie that we're forgotten and take on the truth that we are loved because God loves us. Renewing our minds and healing our perspective about who we are and what we're capable of can be a slow process. It takes time. It's small win by small win. But when we find ourselves thinking things like, I'm a woman, so I can't make this change, or I'm a refugee, so I have no power, we want to catch that thought right away, and we want to ask God, transform my thinking. I am a human being. I'm made in the image of God, and I'm invited to be a part of making positive change. I'm equipped and empowered to do so right where I am. I want to leave you with this quote before I pass it on to Daniela to close the time. This quote is from an author, Marianne Robinson, and she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and I'll add, a change maker in my community?" And she says, actually, who are you not to be? You are a divine child. Your playing small does not serve the world. We are meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the light that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. As we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I love this because it demonstrates the truth that as we are transformed and changed, everyone around us is given the same permission to become transformed and healed and changed and make change as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Daniela.
Yeah, all of the principles that we have talked about so far have led up to this principle. Like Jamie said at the beginning, it's the foundation of all the principles. It kind of wraps them all together. It's a new way of living and being in community. And they all culminate into this last principle of transformation. Transformation is about mindset, but it's also about positivity and wholeness and ownership, the organic and wonder. And we really believe that all of these things is how we transform our communities from the inside out. And as we said at the beginning, this course that we've just gone through together is about the foundations of community-centered development. The next course that we would like to share with you or invite you into is called Community-Centered Development Facilitation. And maybe you can flip to the next slide, because this course is all about practically activating these principles into this process of discovery, connection, and mobilization. It's really a toolbox, actually, to walk you through this process where you can take your community and engage them into these three things. And in doing so, illuminating or actually activating all of the principles we've talked to from beginning till now. And so we can't wait to continue this journey with you all, and we'd love to walk alongside you in it. So grace and peace to you all, and bye for now.
Bye, everyone.